All right. Hi, welcome everyone to our June 25th, 2025 Jupyter Frontends call. I'm Danielle and I'll host today. We'll also leave some time at the end and turn off the recording if anyone wants to say anything off the record. This is a place for us all to talk about Jupyter Notebook and frontends and accessibility. And special welcome to any first-time attendees. Really glad you're here if that's you. Please keep in mind we're recording this call and we follow the Jupyter Community Code of Conduct at jupyter.org/conduct. And this recording will be posted to YouTube for everyone to take a look at after the meeting. I saw first up on the agenda that Mike had some issues and then Jeremy, not issues, but topics. And maybe we'll start there. And if anyone else has any agenda items they'd like to bring in, please go ahead and add them to the agenda. Mike, do you want to go first?
Sure. So my first item is about a pull request that I opened, I think last week, which is fixing, or 2 weeks ago, fixing an issue where if you are streaming a lot of text, either using the std out or standard error, logging in particular is very sensitive to that because it includes a prefix for the source of the warning or other log emitted. We had a memory leak, which was a bug or a feature in browsers. Depending on how you look at this, there's issues open for both of Firefox and Chrome, and the issues are open for what we call 10 years, 11 years. And it comes down to how strings, when they are concatenated after slicing, how the old version, like the source string of something that was sliced, is retained in the memory. So if you are if you have a very long string and take a prefix of that string, do some operations, and then merge that prefix with another string, you end up storing all these intermediate steps in the memory of the browser, quickly filling up your RAM available, and in the end, crashing the browser. So on the Chromium issue, someone described a workaround, which is to internalize the string by basically reloading it, which can be achieved by serializing it down to JSON and then parsing the JSON, which seems like a very silly thing to do, but actually it does allow us to render much longer outputs without crashing the browser, and in general improves the user experience because the page doesn't become sluggish. And surprisingly, when I backtracked that, there is no performance overhead due to this stringification and parsing, which I think is just because like a trade-off between because we are not growing the memory, we are gaining some of the performance which we are losing on going back and forth, stringifying to JSON and then parsing it back. So this is pretty unusual pull request with this very workaround that I wouldn't usually propose for the code base, but it's rather simple, and yeah, I would welcome any reviews. Otherwise, would be very excited to release that in a patch version.
Thanks for working on this. I have to admit, this JSON parsing was kind of odd in the beginning, just looking at the diff. But if there is no other way, or I mean, if it's the best way currently, and if it fixes like real issues, I mean, as long as we have it documented and it's the case, I think, right? Yeah, there is a comment. I guess we can just go for it, right? Yeah. I haven't checked really or tested, but if others want to, then I think that would be great. Otherwise, I'm happy to have a look maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you just mentioned that Firefox did close one of the issues which was tracking this because they tried to rework how they reclaim memory. But in my testing in the nightly version of Firefox, the issue was not gone just yet. So there is a hope that future versions of browsers will no longer require this not very pleasant workaround. We'll see. On the Chromium issue, there's no recent discussion, unfortunately, other than people just like sharing workarounds and being not very happy with how difficult it is to solve. And other than that, I'm back from holidays and trying to look through all the pull requests that are out there, and would like to release 4.44, possibly by the end of the week. So if there is a draft pull request that you have, or if something was tagged in for 4.5, but you think it belongs in 4.4 and should be backported, please tag me and I can take a look.
Thanks so much, Mike. Any other comments or feedback on any of those topics? All right, thanks, Mike, and yeah, welcome back from vacation. Jeremy, you were next up. You had some topics about audio video support and the args command.
Yeah, I wanted to share some progress on this these two PRs that are currently targeting 4.5 to the next JupyterLab manual version. And the first one, I think we talked about it a little bit a while ago, like when we were looking for features to add to JupyterLab 4.5. And personally, I would really like to see support for audio and video natively in JupyterLab. So I started looking into this. Here I can just share. I think that would be there. Can you see the? I suppose you see the JupyterLab, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
With two files. So that is another JupyterLab. It's not like the one from that PR. And it's the case right now like this. Like if you have an audio or an MP4, you want to open it, doesn't work because it's not supported. It's not the format that the JupyterLab understands. It's not a file type that the JupyterLab understands by default. You can still display it in the notebook with IPython display, but with the PR, the IDE. So first we have now the icons. So for video files and audio files, and if you just double click, you can just play the video or the maybe multiple videos. And here it's on purpose that the video continues, playing even if you switch tabs. And audio files. Yeah, that's it. Looks simple, but it's really like I think a huge help in workflows, especially like currently with all of this transcription, whisper, and so on. If you want to do the work on that in JupyterLab, it's a little bit annoying currently because you can't even just preview a video very easily. So that's the thing I want to share. That's the current progress on the PR. Currently, it's using a custom content provider, which overrides the get method to not retrieve the full content because video files can be very big. And instead, it just gets the download URL and puts it in the video tag in HTML directly. So the browser handles all the streaming. I know by default it's much more efficient. It's the same for the videos, for the audio. And I think I haven't tried, but it should normally work out of the box also in JupyterLite, because JupyterLite implements the get download URL as well in the drive to take into account local files. So I think that would be great, because then we wouldn't need to do any custom handling of these files also in Lite after this is available. So for now, the two extensions, they are very similar. In the end, they almost do like the same thing. So I'm curious to know if people have feedback on that. Maybe I don't know, maybe draft it. Maybe it's already at a stage where people can have a look. And I think there is value in having two different extensions still, because we may want to implement different set of features later. For example, for videos, maybe we will want like a toolbar where we can trim a video, like we can edit, I don't know, like the beginning and the end, re-export it, do a little bit of video editing. Of course, not at the level of a proper video editor, but it could be interesting to have that separately, because for audio files, maybe we want to show like the waveform visualizer instead of the raw audio element. Yeah, Nick, you have your hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, that looks great. As we think about moving that into core at some point, getting access to the metadata underlying those things is very clutch. There's a lot of great stuff in there for data extraction and all that. So yeah, getting it on screen is key, but as a subset of multi-mime, multifaceted sort of things, kind of like the hex editor that we saw last week. Actually, the hex editor is a great example, right? So, you'd want to see, I want this reference to this MIME widget, right? Like accepting that the widget is not the thing. It's a thing that shows the thing. And then thinking about, well, okay, so if I wanted to pop a hex editor, would that go in the same widget, or would you now create another link widget that's linked to that one? And then how all this stuff works when it's a plain old MIME thing and not a full document. Yeah, so like certainly toolbar, leave it. I would say leave a toolbar in there for now that stuff could register to for a specific MIME type. So I guess that's all it boils down to.
Yeah, I think the toolbar is there already, but not used because it's a document widget. But yeah, I guess we could, build on top of this to get more information like the metadata for sure.
Yeah, I mean, just like for the PNG, that one's pretty straightforward. Like we know what the EXIF looks like inside of it. So that would be, in that unfortunate case, would you have to load it? No, I don't know. Kind of depends on how it works. But yeah, having access to that would be, having an example of doing that, of a richer inspector of it, would, I think, guide improving that.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for sharing your thoughts.
I guess semi-related. How would that work with JupyterLab? Right? You think about having a computable form of this, where it's like, I got this rich viewer. Yeah, just more thoughts. Nothing concrete. And congrats on the JupyterLab release. Hooray!
Oh yeah.
It does raise that question on Conda Forge that there's now the issues in there. For Conda recipes, should we be setting lab constraints, run constraints, not lab runtime constraints, but run constraints that do not force an install. IPyLab is very sensitive to that because it touches half the API. But generally, I don't know how people that have supported lab-based packages that don't require lab, should we be starting to set those things? I'll drop a link in the chat.
Yeah, good question. I haven't looked too much into that, but we can also talk about it at the end if you want. Yeah, I will catch up on it. So yeah, to wrap up this audio video exploration work, I mean, this could also be an kind of third-party extension, but I feel like people tend to expect these kind of things to just work nowadays, especially like if you try in other editors. So having it in Core Lab to me would make more sense. So it's just there by default, especially when my these video types and audio types are kind of already understood by browsers. So, yeah. But if people have objections, I'm happy to also discuss that. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Yeah. So if no one has a comment, I also wanted to share another PR, which is about trying to document or provide a way to discover what arguments the commands in lab accept. So this is building on top of some work that was done in Lumino already a couple of years ago. But yeah, it's this field called described by for comments. Let me see, maybe I will just share. That will also be a bit easier. So the main issue with comments currently in JupyterLab, when you want to know what let's see. Yeah. If you want to know what arguments a command takes, there is this page in the docs. But the only thing it says is the command ID and the label and the shortcut. And that's it. And with this PR, the idea is to add this kind of described by field, which takes a JSON schema for the args and specify what kind of arg the command takes. And I also went try to integrate that in the docs. So keeping a table makes it very difficult to read. So instead, now the layout is more like having a command like this, and then the arguments below. And the main advantage is you can just send a link directly to a command, which was not possible before. Here, you couldn't just get a link. So yeah, this is what this produces. So it's a very, very long PR. Beginning, I tried to do it only for 2 packages, but then I wanted to see what it looks like for all of them. I think, I'm not sure if I missed any command. And I used, I tried to use an LLM to help with this, to automate. And it did the job, but I'm not sure if everything is correct. So I would be happy if people want to also have a look at this PR. First, like share like what you think about this, and also I mean, if we are all fine going, going ahead with this new metadata added to comments, then we can make sure that the arguments are correct, they have the correct type, and so on. So yeah, or if people have some prompting tricks that to make sure that we can scan the whole code base, because it's a lot of comments. It's like I think 400 in the end. So it's very it's a long, especially in a notebooks package, notebook extension. All right, that's enough. That's it for me. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. Any other questions or comments about that topic, team? I see someone, Nick, has their hand raised. Hey, Nick.
Yep. Just two quick notes in there. One, should all those descriptions be run through the translator so that they come out in the desired language? It'd be a lot of work for someone to translate all of them, but you know, if it's there, just because I saw the trans under right above it for the description of the command, so that might be good. And then second one on the docs page, that's still a very long docs page. Perhaps splitting them by their namespace into sections would make the drop down a little bit tidier. That's all.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. For the translation, I think it's technically possible because it's just everything is done in TypeScript, so we have access to this. But I guess that would mean requiring the translator for almost all plugins that add comments, but we can make it optional anyway. So, but yeah, like you said, it's going to be a lot of strings to translate. Be happy to see this flow coming.
It certainly would get some eyes on it too, unless we just delegate that to the LLM too, right?
Yeah, I think we could try actually. Yeah. But I don't know like how crowding works nowadays. Like maybe they have already integrated such tools to help with translations. But speaking of LLMs, so I think the motivations for this year it's just in for documentation first, like people wanting to execute command from other plugins or extensions, but also at some point make it discoverable by LLMs as well, so they can start coding tools based on the comments. Yeah, that's it.
Great. Thanks, Nick, for that. All right, we'll move on to the next topic. Rosio had about adding QA target IDs, and I think Pablo joined for that as well.
Yeah, hi. I just added that as well. It came up in this week's triage. So I think Mike shared a comment. I'll post a link here. But I think Pablo, if would you like to speak to the issue? I'm not sure if you had a chance to look at Mike's feedback as well.
Hi everyone. No, I haven't been able to look at the feedback, but on summary is we're trying to automatize some tests that we are doing. So in order to follow the standard way of doing it that we are following now for Anaconda, we are using specific IDs for locate and select some elements on the UI. So to instead of relying on CSS classes or something like that. So that's why maybe we would need like these specific classes on the Jupyter Labs, so we can easily select them, and that way the test will be easier to handle, it's easier to maintain, and also it will be standardized with other projects on the company. So that's why we were like requesting if that would be possible to add those IDs to certain elements like buttons, status bar, that kind of stuff.
Thanks, Pablo. And I saw Nick
you.
in chat said recommend putting them in a data field, then adding a new attribute. And then I think, Mike, you had some comments in the issue as well.
Yes, we already add data command for everything which is created using commands. And I think this is kind of preferred way to find elements, because in JupyterLab almost everything is a command or a plugin. Otherwise, I have not seen this particular attribute QA target used in other projects. So I'd worry a little bit about introducing something which is like another quirk of how Jupyter does things. And if we could follow standards, prefer to follow standards. But of course, adding IDs, we already have quite a few of like unique IDs for things which are truly unique, like the top bar, the menu bar, the sidebars. I think they all have like uniquely identifying IDs. And if there are more elements in the shell which are truly unique, I think that makes sense to add ID attributes on them.
Thanks, Mike. So, yeah, that first recommendation about using Galata as a wraparound playwright. I guess Pablo, have you guys tried to use Galata before?
I mean, sometimes we can use those data commands, but I mean, different projects has different things, so that's why we need to unify everything, all the projects under the same standard. That's why on the team we come up with the QA target as the standard one. That was sorry, that was decided before I joined to the QA team, but I mean, as far as I know, that was the one that, for example, the authorization is already using it for example, the login. .org is already using those that ID as well. So those we are trying to push in to use that as and set it as good practices. So that's why that one is preferred maybe to other ones as data command or whatever. I mean, we could use it, but it wouldn't be ideal for us.
I think to maybe translate Anaconda, speak a little bit, Pablo, for everyone. You were talking about some of like the internal extensions that we have. Some of them are using that QA ID already. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. I guess, has anyone else seen a need for some type of extra data field or ID for testing purposes? Or is there any other trade-offs we should discuss?
Well, yes. So I think like if assuming that we are in the playwright territory, so what they recommend and what Nick mentioned is like using ARIA labels, because this is like canonical and this is accessible by default, and it doesn't necessarily guarantee that the code that you are testing will be accessible, will produce accessible interface, but it helps with that. So if we are writing tests for JupyterLab, it would ideally be that they are also covering some of the accessibility. Now, if there are parts of the test suite which currently rely on Galata to generate a complex locator, but could be simplified by adding a new attribute, whether it's QA target or whatever, a data field. I think that this could be valuable in instances where we are not testing using the standard Galata method, and I do have a project like that where we are building a Jupyter Lite site and testing it against the build artifact. So we do not have the ability to inject things the same way that Galata does, or are not spawning the server like a fully Galata-based workflow would do. So having a simpler selector is always nicer than having a very complex one. And I think there is no real harm in adding this QA target, in the sense that this shouldn't impact performance that much, as long as there is no CSS trying to match against these new attributes. The cost is, of course, that if we are committing that there is something like that, which is extra, we will need to maintain that and not break that in the future releases, because some other testing things downstream will be either angry or will not update to a newer version until they modify the tests, which I think might be like another concern and another cost for the maintainability. So I think that the discussion shouldn't be about performance, because impacts would be minimal, but just do we have a consensus that this is what we want with respect to future maintenance of the code base, and how can this benefit the tests that JupyterLab or Jupyter Notebook and other frontends run themselves.
Thanks, Mike. I think that's a good summary. So I heard, hey, if it's possible, ARIA tags or go out of data commands should be used. And then I think there's a discussion on whether adding specific data fields for testing would benefit everyone and be worth the extra maintenance to the code base. Is that right? Does anyone else have any input on those trade-offs?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. I mean, as Mike was saying, like having the QA separated from accessibility and stuff, also that it will give more flexibility. It will help yeah, the maintenance and everything, and adding just IDs just to identify, I don't think that I don't cost much in terms of performance, but that's I don't know. But I yeah, thank you.
So I think if you are looking for like an encouragement, yes, please open a pull request, or no, don't do that. A good next step would be to show few specific places where you would want to add data attributes or other kind of attributes to help with QA, with testing, because maybe these are places where it's obvious to everyone. Yes, it's actually difficult to target this with a CSS selector. But if you were to go and add it across the code base for like majority of the elements, that's like a different ask and a potentially longer discussion. And so it would be also take longer to review that. There is no regressions introduced by a larger PR. So if it's just adding it here and there, maybe we can just look at the list and quickly approve that, if that will be of significant benefit to your testing.
Okay, I think yeah, we can come up with a list. I add 2 images showing like a couple of examples of places that we would love to select directly, like for example the close button on tabs. Currently I have to look for the title, like close untitled dot and the extension of the file. I don't always have that name, so that's why it would be beneficial if I have simply like the ID of tab close. I could say, okay, the first tab, close it, that's it. Or the second one, I don't need to go to grab and select for the name of the file, which is something that it's dynamic and it could change. So We can come up with a list of the elements that we will potentially need, and from there we can see how feasible and easy it is to add those. Thanks.
Absolutely. Just for the tab closing, that might end up being implemented in the other repository in Lumino. Just FYI. But I think yes, I know that this is particularly difficult to select. So I think we can arrive at a consensus there.
Great, thanks, Mike, and thanks for the pointer that some of that stuff might be Lumino. That's good. All right, the next topic was about pre-commit CI. Not sure who submitted that one though. Did someone put that on the agenda?
I think it's in the additional discussion for the unrecorded parts.
Okay, that sounds good. Does anyone else have any other topics they'd like to discuss during the recording? All right, hold on, everyone. Thanks for joining.